This is a Honda Aquatrax R12x Turbo. Just got the head rocker cover off and looking at taking the camshafts out, checking all the tension of the head bolts again, making sure they're all at the correct settings because it was a new head that was put on, so I just wanted to re-tension them now. Well, make sure that they're all correct. To save pulling off this side manifold, and it's hard to see down in there, but taking off the impeller shaft cover. Where's that? Just down in there, sorry. Just down in there underneath the turbo. And then to alleviate the need to actually turn the motor over to get all the timing sorted out, I didn't want to undo any of that stuff down there. I don't want to mess around. I've done it all before. I've got the timing all sorted out before. I know this engine is absolutely running as it is, exactly where it stopped on this correct timing at the moment. So don't attempt to do any of this unless you know a bit about engines and timing and stuff like that. Instead of finding top dead center, I've now marked with black texture and white, like liquid paper or Tipex marker, various lines which are on the camshaft as well as on the actual chain itself, on the camshaft, on the chain itself, arrows pointing in various spots as well to other lines. It's a bit hard to see down there, but there's arrows down there, and then the corresponding line here, and then that has also got the white marker line onto the chain, and it's got a black marker line as well which goes onto the chain, hard to see. And then a bit deeper down I've got a couple of let's see if I can get my finger in here, run a texture along here so that when I put my head down in this area here near the turbo, which is through this gap here, I can look directly once I've put the camshafts back in and also make sure that that line is dead straight. So if I've got all of these black lines, white markers all lined up when I put these camshafts back in place and link the chain back over, if I've got all those links in the same place, it's basically then set up exactly how the motor was already set up at this particular part of the induction cycle and exhaust cycle. So it alleviates the need to, I'll just put it back down in here, alleviates the need to undo the cover down there, line up the timing mark off the crankshaft and the impeller shaft, which means like turning the motor over and stuff like that. So this is my little shortcut, but I would only recommend doing this sort of stuff if you actually know what you're doing with timing chains and camshaft chain sort of setups. I still have to loosen the tensioner down in underneath this exhaust manifold so that that chain will loosen so I can actually remove the camshafts. And I don't know if any of you have had previous experience with Honda Aquatrax and twin overhead cams. In this particular 1200 cc like R12x Turbo, it's this exhaust cam that goes in first, and then the inlet cam links underneath the chain and sits in as well. And then that's the same with the process of taking them out. Take the inlet one out first, and then take the exhaust one out second, and then obviously you have a piece of wire without this cover on here, have a piece of wire holding the chain up, which you might have seen in some of my other videos. So hopefully that explains a bit of a process of how to prevent having to do a lot of other messing around just by making some marks. And you might be needing to take your camshafts out to get the specifications checked or something like that. In this particular case, as I mentioned, I'm taking the camshafts out because I want to recheck all the torque settings and all the head bolts are underneath the camshafts. So hopefully you find this video interesting and helpful. Okay, so put a screwdriver through here when I remove the cams to stop the chain dropping down inside. And then as you can see, hopefully you can see it in the light there. Just got a hooked piece of wire, and then I'm running it down into a part of the actual cam bolt threads there. So just make sure it's a small enough piece of steel wire. Bend it just so it's got a hook, then feed it down into the hole carefully so that you don't scrape on any of the threads. And then that holds the cam chain up and out so it doesn't go falling down into the sump area. Make your own Honda Aquatrax or any basically cam chain tensioner tool. This one has been made specifically for my Honda Aquatrax. Now normally you can buy like little tools that push into the cam chain tensioner, and you twist it around and then you push in and lock it into place. So to make this one, it's simply a small flathead screwdriver, and then I've put a rubber sleeve over the top of that. So fed a rubber sleeve over the top of it, and I believe it was a 10mm nut, I reckon was the right thread for the cam chain tensioner. So I threaded a 10mm nut onto this part of the plastic. You might be able to see the grooves there. Onto the rubber. And what that does is it allows you to thread it in after you've done the screwdriver part of like releasing the tension off the chain, if you're about to remove the cam chain off the camshafts, in particular of overhead cam Aquatrax engine. This little finger twist bit here, why is that not? Is actually a part off of an old garden spray gun nozzle, and this was the internal bit here, and the end of that unscrews. Come on, unscrew, there we go. And then literally, because it's got a thread on it, you push it down onto the screwdriver, push the rubber like vacuum tube onto the screwdriver, screw the thread of this onto the actual rubber tube, and that gives you some finger grip points to twist that tube in once you've actually fed the screwdriver into the cam chain tensioner hole. And you screw the screwdriver around, and then you hold it to the spot where it's released the tension off the cam chain, and while you're holding it to that spot, then you use your thumb to wrap that around, and it puts the thread that you've created on this end with the 10mm into the 10mm thread hole of the cam chain tensioner, or in this case a 10mm because it's a Honda Aquatrax R12x engine. So that's just a a little quick hack how to make your own cam chain tensioner tool at home out of an old garden spray, handheld garden spray nozzle with the plastic insert. Doesn't matter if it's a metal insert, as long as the end bit that you can unscrew has got a thread through the center that will be wide enough to go over the top of the rubber. So what happens with that is when you're screwing this into place, the threads of the rubber here start to squash in tighter against the actual screwdriver itself. So the screwdriver itself, you don't want it, once you've let go of the screwdriver, to spin back and put tension back on the actual cam chain itself. So by putting this little part onto your screwdriver, you're actually threading this end here into the 10mm thread area where you took the bolt out from the cam chain tensioner, and then that nice and firmly squeezes up against the screwdriver. So your screwdriver, you've screwed around, release the cam chain tension, hold it, and then move this into place, squash it all into place, the rubber around the screwdriver, and that allows you to let go of the screwdriver, and then the cam chains on top of the motor are now going to be loose, and you can remove the cams. And then likewise, once you put the cams back in, undo this out of the 10mm thread, and then you can just twist anti-clockwise and release the looseness that you've just put on by taking the pressure off, and that regains the pressure and holds and snaps the chains all back nice and tightly into place on top of the engine section, on top of your cams, for an overhead cam engine. Hopefully this little tool is something that might save you a lot of time if you didn't want to wait for an ordered part to arrive at your house and you want to just make your own. There we go, nifty little tool to get you out of trouble for releasing pressure on cam chains via the cam chain tensioner.